Okay. So we're back. Gridiron 360, Bill and Dave, doing our daily fantasy thing. FanDuel, main slate. Let's take a look. As always, we give you a high-end wide receiver, a high-end running back that we're going to play, and a low-end wide receiver, low-end running back that we're going to play. Do we need to look back on last week? Or was it just so bad?
I got nothing for you.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. We really played a lot last week, and not apologies. It is what it is. We played what made sense in terms of a game script, in terms of New Orleans, rode them with a stack. Totally made sense against the Atlanta Falcons. New Orleans is at home, and I don't think anyone would have predicted what happened there. This has been one of the big issues, not just NFL, but definitely in the fantasy world. It's caused some shakeup, and it's made it a little more difficult to predict some of these things. So here we go. We're just going to move forward to this week and give it another go and see if we can drag ourselves off the mat here and put something together worthwhile. Sound good?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. Let me get into this thing here. Let's start with high-end wide receiver, bro.
Okay.
We're eyeing these guys. Always love Michael Thomas, but he is the highest price guy at $9,000. I am liking DeAndre Hopkins because of the matchup against Baltimore, but Baltimore's secondary is probably the better part of their defense, and they will give DeAndre a lot of attention. And though he can, do just about anything against anyone, he has been limited in his capacity to see the end zone this year, as well as rack up a lot of yards. He gets targets, but love the Tampa Bay receivers in this one. If you recall, the last time New Orleans and Tampa Bay, who are playing this weekend, met, Chris Godwin went 10 out of 12. I'm sorry, he went, what was he? New Orleans? Yeah, he went 7 for 9, 125, and 2 TDs. That is very spicy.
Yep.
Julio against Carolina, also another nice one. We riddled through some of these guys, like Amari Cooper this week against Detroit, but at the end of the day, we settled on Mr. Edelman for the New England Patriots. We saw that game against Baltimore a couple weeks back before New England had a bye. Last week they're on a bye to get themselves right, and I just can't get the image out of my head towards the end of the game where they showed Brady and Edelman on the sideline sitting down before it got out of hand, when they were still in it, and they seemed to be a look of concern, but like they could get it done. And then as it slowly started to get further away from them, you could sense frustration. Those guys are on the same page. Peanut butter and jelly, those two.
Yep.
This could be a good day. We know that Philadelphia's weakness on their defense is their secondary. My concern is it's more of the downfield threat. But let's be honest, Brady can get the ball to anyone. He will spread around, but Edelman is his guy, and they got to get themselves right back where they were. These power rankings have dropped them down below the likes of the Ravens and San Francisco and maybe even Seattle now. So they need to kind of get themselves back on track. $7,400, it allows us money to play with. That's kind of where we went. We think it's a good play high end. We want to get more than double his value. We'd like to see 20 out of him. The scary part is I haven't seen him exceed that. But this is a game coming off the bye that I believe he could get a good load of the targets and could come through with a 20 spot somewhere in there. And if that happens, I think it's a win.
Yep.
So we're going to go ahead and put in Julian Edelman at $7,400 as our top wide receiver in this lineup for this weekend. And again, the main slate, all the 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock games on Sunday. No Thursday night, no Sunday night, no Monday night. Let's go to high-end running back.
High-end running back. We looked at a few guys. I mean, you've got Christian McCaffrey.
I love McCaffrey's
fantastic matchup. But again, McCaffrey is almost $2,000 higher than the next best running back in Dalvin Cook. McCaffrey's got a good matchup against Atlanta.
He does have a little bit of a what appears to be a foot injury that kept him out of practice today.
Yeah, I for $2,000 higher than the next guy, any sort of injury scares me off a little bit. But just more importantly, it's the money on this one. Dalvin Cook's got a little bit tougher of a matchup with the Denver defense. He gets his. He is coming in at $8,600. So we kind of looked around and got some other guys out there. Kamara, is there a little bit of get right here? Tampa, again, good against the run, but Kamara more than just a running type back.
And they need to get going, man. Yep. Like if they're gonna make their push, now's the time. And they can't trifle with this Tampa Bay team. They need to just take them over.
Yeah, and then you got Mark Ingram going up against Houston. Again, had a very good game last week. They're gonna need to be versatile against this Houston team. Still, I would say, still need the touchdown more times than not. So we shied away from him, and we looked at Ezekiel Elliott, and he's just got a ready-made deal here. Detroit, obviously is a poor rushing defense. Didn't do so well against the Bears, but the Bears' offense and even their running game, which is the better part of their offense, is still not excellent. And they did all right against them, but the
week before that, they got taken advantage of by Josh Jacobs.
Yep.
Which was week 9, I think. Week 8, they got taken advantage of by. I'm trying to find.
All right. Well, he's looking for that.
So that's where we want to go.
We like it. And on the other end, I like this game. Dallas has got to kind of get going again. And Zeke didn't have a particularly good game against Minnesota. They need this.
Up Amari Cooper.
Yep. They need this horse to start running like the thoroughbred that he has in the past. And so I think it's going to be Zeke all day. I could see Zeke getting it out of the backfield, catching the ball. He could blow this one up. So we liked Zeke on that end. So who did we go? Should we go back to wide receiver and do the low end?
If we do that, if we drop these two guys in, that leaves us $44,200 out of our $60,000 salary, $63.14 average per position. So let's go to low end wide receiver that we're looking at.
All right, what do you got?
Again, we want to try to keep this around the $6,000 mark or less. There are a few guys out there that, are curious. You brought up Deebo Samuel, had a good week last week, hauling in 8 of 11 targets for 112 yards. Didn't see the end zone, but this is against an Arizona team that, not very good. The week before that, they did play Arizona, and he was 4 of 7 for 40 yards. He's only $5,600, so it was not bad price to pay. Hunter Renfrow for Oakland going against Cincinnati, $5,700. Kind of like that a little bit. Kind of like it, but, there are some other things in play here. We saw a Calvin Ridley that is $5,500 that they're going against Carolina, and Carolina's secondary, their first option on their secondary, who will be on Julio Jones, is okay. It's the guys behind that that will have to take care of a Calvin Ridley. And keep in mind, Hooper is probably out this game.
Oh, he's out for, saying now he's out for a month.
Ridley's going to have to get involved.
Yeah, the big problem with Ridley is not talent. This is a guy that should cost a lot more. It's just been Matt Ryan not looking at him, and that's been scary. He's had many games. What did I say? He had 4 out of his last 5 or something like that, or
yeah, I mean, the last 4 games.
He's never had more than 5 targets in the last 6 games.
He had 7 targets against Seattle, but only caught 4 of those. So that also says something,
Sorry, not targets, catches.
Catches, yeah.
Sorry.
We also took a gander at Terry McLaurin for the upside factor at $5,500 against the Jets D. Look, they have Jamal Adams back there in the secondary who can wreck things for them. Dwayne Haskins, I'm not too. Yeah, he can get the ball downfield, and it might be a good play for some big play options. The upside's there, but still a little concerning to me. Not necessarily a bad option, but not the option we went with.
Yep. So who do we go with?
So we went up $100 from that guy to $5,600 with Marquise Hollywood Brown of the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, one of the things we said earlier is this game is probably going to be one of the bigger over-unders of the week. We'll have to look at that in our preview for the NFL, but they're going to have to put some points on the board. Houston's secondary is hurting right now. Their defense altogether is hurting, but their secondary is hurting, even though they did a good job in London against Jacksonville. This is a whole different beast. Points are going to be on the board. He's their downfield threat. And at $5,600, if we got 2 times the value, that's 11 points. I think he's good for at least that. And I think the upside's there enough that, you said it earlier, we get one deep ball to him that he can catch and take into the end zone. He pretty much covers that 2, even a little 2 plus times.
And they're going to need that to spread the field and to allow Lamar Jackson and potentially Mark Ingram to get some running room. So they're going to have to push this defense a little bit at times.
I don't think he's going to get the target share because he really hasn't this year.
No.
Okay,
I
so
agree.
it is going to be very dependent on a big play, but we've seen that, him capable of producing that. And we've seen that, look, this is an offense that you've got a lot of things to concern yourself with, and doubling up Marquise Brown I don't think is going to be one of them. They're going to run 3 tight end sets, and they're going to have to bring some people down into the box to cover that, leaving those corners one-on-one.
Yep, agree. So should we go on to the low-end running back?
We'll go into the low-end running back, brother.
All right, well, we looked at a few different guys. Look, we mentioned it earlier in our previous fantasy season cast. There's some juicy matchups out there, but unfortunately, you got to pay for them.
Yep.
So we kind of looked around, and some of the guys that we were looking at in our price range, we went to the lower end. You've even got guys like Adrian Peterson going against the Jets with $6,300. I mean, really getting below. Probably 2 guys that were of interest to us below the 6,000 mark. Maybe Duke Johnson in this game again, not higher price, lower price, but at the same time, a guy that might touch the ball a bit, a little bit more involved in the passing game we mentioned. So we looked at Duke Johnson, Hill from Atlanta. We looked at, just because he had a good game last week.
And Carolina's defense in the run D is not very good.
Yep, but really, for his scoring perspective, he scored on his one of 2 catches he had, or maybe it was his only catch.
He wasn't that productive in terms of yardage. He had 61 yards on 20 carries.
Right. So
that's kind of the bugaboo, and we don't know, I think, enough about him. That $5,900, even if he just did 2 times, that's 12 points. I mean, last week, he had 13.6, and everybody's raving about him. And I know Carolina's defense isn't very good, especially against the run. It's not that I wouldn't play him in some lineups, and I probably will because there's a savings there. But for the purposes of this, we trying to lean more on a guy that's going to get the workload, certainly.
Yeah, because then we ran into guys like David Johnson. He's sharing a workload. Again, we mentioned Peterson, Sony Michel, always tough with New England to figure out what they're going to do. Plus, we went with Edelman. Carlos Hyde, we kind of like Carlos Hyde at $6,300. It's a little steep on that one with not necessarily a guarantee that he goes off. Matt Breida, I think they're going to run the ball with San Francisco, but they also have Tevin Coleman. So we got up to Devin Singletary, and his is a kind of a twofold from my perspective. One, it's against Miami, which can be had in the running game, so that's solid. The other part is Devin Singletary's taken over the backfield in that for that Buffalo team, and just really with the kind of move towards him and his explosiveness, this is kind of a good matchup for him to be able to take advantage of this team and potentially really rack up some points. I certainly think he'll get it with the carries and the yards, but if he gets a touchdown on top of that, we're talking about some serious gravy on this one. It doesn't take much for him to double that over at 13 points. I could see him going for 80-plus yards and a score in this game and potentially catch the ball a little bit. So
yeah, I mean, look, he didn't have a great game last week in Buffalo's loss to Cleveland. He only rushed the ball 8 times, but it was for 42 yards, so it was more than 5 yards a clip that he did, that he was running. Didn't see the end zone. I think that's a little different. We're talking about Miami. We're talking about a team that is resurging a little bit. I could see Buffalo coming off this loss to Cleveland last week, trying to get themselves back on track. They still have opportunities to hit a wild card in this thing. And, Josh Allen's great, but it's going to start with establishing a run game against, one of the worst run defenses statistically in the league in Miami.
Yep, agreed.
So if we drop those 4 guys in, again, top-end running back Zeke, low-end running back Singletary, top-end receiver Edelman, low-end running back Marquise Hollywood Brown, that'll leave us with $32,100 of our $60,000 salary, $64.20 a player on average. Where were we go? So those are our top 4.
Yep.
So from here, we'll go ahead and build out the rest of the lineup of what we're going to play. And again, you can mix and match as you should, and try some different variations of this, and hopefully it'll work out. But where do you want to go next on this?
Why don't we go to quarterback?
All right, quarterback. We were trying to determine, if we look on the lower end, is there anyone there that might be decent? I liked a little Kyler Murray, even though it is San Francisco. He did well against them a couple weeks ago, and at 7,600, it's pretty good value. You got Jameis in there also at 7,600. My concern with Jameis is
turnover.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna? Which Jameis
little
are you
feast
gonna
or
get?
famine? Yeah.
Yep. Kirk Cousins comes in at 7,700. Not bad, but you are talking about a Denver defense, especially their secondary, that is pretty strong. I mean, I think they've got them ranked. Let's see, they have them 4th against the pass, is what I'm seeing on the FanDuel. Yep. Depending on where you're looking. So there is a little bit of a concern there, and I really kind of believe they'll try to get, Cook on the ground to control the game. You threw out Brady.
I liked him in this matchup. Again, Brady is.
And you could get a stack if we did that.
Yeah, he's a little tough on. On fantasy in general. Philadelphia, though, that's their hard, the tough part, and New England can attack a weakness better than anybody, but they also can go against the grain and sometimes do the opposite of what you think they'll do. So that's kind of, again, it's always my thing. New England is a very hard team to rely on with most of their players
in a fantasy world. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what we know again is that, and from what we've seen, is that Philadelphia on the defensive side of the ball is strong up front, weaker on the back end. So the thought process in game script, and we know Brady is one of the best at getting the ball out of his hands quickly.
Yep.
So if he gets pressured and he doesn't move around a lot of the pocket, it's going to be quick strike, and that's kind of where Edelman comes into play. And that's one of the reasons we slotted him in there. What else did we look at?
You got a good matchup with Josh Allen. Again, we already went Devin Singletary on this one. Plus, Josh Allen is not again, they tend to play closer games, which when you talk about a Miami team that's not very explosive, that would lead to maybe a little less of an offensive production. Stafford obviously has got an injury question and a tough matchup against Dallas. Garoppolo had a stinker, but I think their running game having a stinker in the last game is even bigger deal. So I think they're going to look to play more to the ground. Got Dak Prescott. Challenge with him is, could that game get out of hand? And again, we believe that Zeke is going to be the focal point.
Yep.
So really you're looking at the top guys. Your top guys are Lamar Jackson at 8,800, Drew Brees at 8,300, and Deshaun Watson at 8,200. To me, I mean, there's a lot to like about any one of them. We kind of looked at it from a cost perspective, but also just from how the game's going to play out. We feel like Deshaun Watson offers all the upside and much less of the downside. And then on top of that, obviously, is $600 cheaper than Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, he's $100 cheaper than Breeze. And if I was talking between him and Breeze right now, I think just because of the game at hand and who they're facing, that this is going to be, this is going to be a good game. It's going to be a slugfest. I do believe there'll be points on the board. And I love getting Lamar Jackson in there, but he's also $600 more. And compared to Deshaun, I think Deshaun can put up just as good, if not better, numbers. Remember, this kid's a gamer. He rises up to the occasion when he has to face a good team and especially a good quarterback on the other side of the ball. So I'm very high. I know you maybe not as much as me, and I talked you into it, but I am very high on Deshaun this weekend. They coming off of a bye. It's going to be a good one, I think. And I think that for the mere fact that this thing could go back and forth all the way to the end, at the end of the game, when it matters most is when Deshaun wants the ball in his hands. Same with Jackson. Again, $600 difference is why we went on the Deshaun side.
Yep.
So if we drop him in there, that now leaves us 23.9, 59.75 a player. Where are we going next?
Let's go tight end.
Tight end, okay. So I love Kittle because they're playing Arizona, but Kittle is the most expensive tight end at $7,500.
Also hobbled.
And he's hobbled. So I think he'll get back just because this is a late 4 o'clock Sunday game. But the price is, and not that he can't do it, but in order for us to fit in some other things that we've been looking at, we had to move away from beyond. Next to him comes Mark Andrews at 6,900. My only issue there is that they'll run 3 tight end sets, and even last week when Andrews had a good game, Nick Boyle was still involved. The week before that, Boyle and Hurst were still involved along with Andrews. They will run that 3 tight end set, so it almost is who's going to get open. It's a guessing game. At 6,900, he's going to have to produce a good 15 burger or more. Can happen, but I don't know if he'll see the end zone twice in this game like he did last week.
Yep. Then we go to Darren Waller. I mean, Darren Waller, one of the challenges has been, even though we really like him, as well, 2 challenges. One is he has kind of fallen out of the offense a little bit, I think, as he's caught a lot of attention around the NFL. That's been beneficial to some of the other receiving weapons they got. But the other part, too, is they're playing Cincinnati. If this game gets out of hand, you could find the passing game starts to go a little bit, so that could also pull him out of the mix even if he's having a good game. Got Austin Hooper's injured. He's out for a period of time. So we started getting into some of the cheaper tight ends. We got Zach Ertz. He gets a rough matchup against New England. They know how to scheme against that defensively.
I told you before, I feel like he needs to be heavily involved in this game
for
them to be successful. But at the same token, he could be heavily involved but not thrown to, where he draws attention, and then all of a sudden you have guys like Goddard, who's way lower, and I like that, but we tried to play that game before. Philly, just like New England, is one of those teams where, you can be taking a risk playing those guys.
Yep. You got guys like Jared Cook, again, some inconsistency there. Jason Witten against Detroit. Again, if that game gets out of hand, and Witten has not been the pass catcher and the target he's been in the past. You got guys like Doyle, Howard, Hawkinson, Ebron. All those guys are probably very much touchdown dependent in this game.
One guy I did bring up to you was Tyler Eifert.
Yep.
Look, he hasn't had a great year, but the past couple weeks, especially this past week with Finley in there, he is a safety blanket. He did catch a touchdown. It's an Oakland team that can give it up on the back end, on the receiving end. I mean, they're not great against the pass, but you're riding a guy that, it only maybe need to get you 10 points, and it could happen, but we felt a little better about somebody else.
Yeah, so in this one, we went with Greg Olsen, one playing against the Falcons, with the New Orleans game, not included, has been giving up the plays on the passing game. Olsen's seen a little bit of a resurgence, looks to be healthy, which is obviously always a big thing, and he's playing hard. I think he has become somebody that Kyle Allen likes to look to. So we think the chance there, and he's, moderately priced at $5,100.
He had a great game. I mean, he went 8 receptions on 10 targets for 98 yards. Didn't see the end zone, but still produced a 13.8, which isn't bad considering he didn't see the end zone. If you watch that game, it was in a mess of a snowstorm.
Yep.
They're trying to come back against Green Bay, and he really got involved and made some. He showed that he is still every bit as capable as he ever was to, be a have competitive toughness, to get involved in a game when they need them and to make plays. And if you look at the last 4 games, he's had, aside from the San Francisco game, which got out of hand on them, he's had, where he had 2 receptions on 2 targets. The week before that, he had 7 targets. The week after the San Francisco game had 6, and last week had 10. So he's definitely a guy that is involved. And quite frankly, we talked about DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel also being involved. So the offense for Carolina has multiple weapons, and he is not forgotten about.
Yep, absolutely.
And like you said, 5,100, very reasonably priced. An Atlanta team that I think, especially if Atlanta is able to come out and have success on their defensive front, they're going to focus on stopping Christian McCaffrey. That is what their focus is. So that'll lead Kyle Allen to have to get rid of the ball rather quickly. And, Olsen could be a big factor in this game. So we're going to drop him in there. And at this point, we've got $18,800 to play with, $62.66 per position. We've got a wide receiver, a flex, and a defense to fill. Let's go D.
All right. So a couple options here. Your high-end options, you got Oakland against Cincinnati. Not necessarily a terrible play there. The Bills in Miami. Again, those are going against the 2 of the worst offenses in the NFL. Got the Patriots against Philadelphia. That one's kind of interesting that they are a $5,000 cost too as well, just given that Philadelphia can score at times. So you got some of those looks. You got San Francisco at 4,900 going against Arizona, New Orleans going against Tampa Bay. Really, all of them make me nervous in some way or another for the cost, in the sense that like Miami has shown an ability to score some points lately. And Buffalo does kind of play down to their competition.
Yeah, San Francisco played Arizona a couple weeks ago and only came out with 3 points from a fantasy world. So I know that they do have a good defense, but like that offense of Arizona is just gonna run fast. So it's they made that a closer game a couple weeks ago. We dipped down to who? We were dipping down, taking a gander at Dallas.
Yep, we had two defenses that I think we liked the most. There was the Dallas at Detroit. At 4,100 is a good bargain, especially if you consider the fact that Stafford may not be playing. He did not practice yesterday,
and that's something to look at.
Yeah, and we're going to keep an eye on that too.
Lineups, if Stafford is ruled out, that may be something that you could swap them in and then have some extra dollars to play with in some of these other positions.
Yep, absolutely. So that was one we considered, but then we kind of went with, it's earlier in the week. We don't know that for certain, and it was one we liked anyway, was Minnesota Vikings at home against Denver. They're at 4,700. The Vikings gave up some points against Dallas, but Dallas is a much different offense than Denver. I think there's some balance there and some opportunity. I
think the Brandon Allen kid did a great job for Denver, but how long will that go? I mean, you're talking about a really good Minnesota defense he's going to face now, as opposed to last week when who did Denver face? They faced Cleveland, okay? And that Cleveland defense is not what we thought it was, and it's certainly not that of the Vikings. And they got to play Cleveland in Denver. This game's going to be in Minnesota.
Yep.
And Minnesota is, this is the time for them. They're surging. They've got to continue to strive for greatness so they have a shot at the postseason.
Yep. So where did that take us to? How would that leave us?
We'll drop them in at 4,700, which is very reasonably priced in my mind. Now we are at $14,100, $70.50 a player. So
got a nice chunk of change.
We got a nice chunk of change to fill 2 positions, a wide receiver and a flex. Now, you could go wide receiver in that flex position if you'd like. Let's go to flex, but we do like to try to find running back if there's one worthwhile. So where do we go with it?
So, obviously we got McCaffrey at 10.5, which would really lower our ability to fill a wide receiver position.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to fill it because that would leave us $3,600 and you wouldn't be able to pick anybody up.
Yep. Then you got Dalvin at Denver, which is a good one at running back. Again, we mentioned some of these other receivers. You got your Tampa receivers. You got DeAndre Hopkins. You got Michael Thomas in there. But I think one of the juicier matchups on the running back end is Josh Jacobs going up against Cincinnati. no matter who he's played, he's run well against. He just really has had a very good year. And maybe the candidate for offensive rookie of the year, that good. And he's going against a weak Cincinnati
They have
team.
him ranked as the worst rush defense.
Yeah, and here's the thing, too, is he doesn't disappear if the game gets out of hand. I think he's gonna get his touches and he's gonna get his work. And at 5 yards a carry, I think this guy, he could easily see the end zone once, maybe twice in this game.
Look, if he's not going over 100 yards on the ground, he's going over 100 all-purpose through the ground in the air.
Yeah, and I think scores are definitely in play here for him. So I just think this is a very, very good matchup for him, and where he could triple his value, I think, very, very easily in this game. With the game plan, I believe they're going to attack him with.
Yeah.
So we went high end there. We got we took some money out of the kitty. What were we left with?
That leaves us with $6,100 for a receiver, which is actually not too bad. We took again. We dropped a couple of guys that we really thought might have been worthwhile out there, and Deebo Samuel, Hunter Renfrow. You got Calvin Ridley. You got McLaurin, but that if we went with one of those guys, you would still leave some money on the table. So we tried to look at maximizing our dollar amount. And, with $6,100 left, there's no one there at 61. You've got Christian Kirk, Tyrell Williams at $6,200. That's $100 out of our price range. And then you got two guys at $6,000 in DJ Moore for Carolina and DJ Chark for Jacksonville.
Yep. And if we wanted to look a little lower down, because, again, we're not always about spending every dime we got. Some names. I like Mohamed Sanu, but we do have Edelman already and kind of covering that part of the field. We believe he's going to get his looks. John Brown, again, not a bad play, but just the challenge with him is just there's not a whole lot of passing yards to go around in that Buffalo offense. Hunter Renfrow we liked. I mean, he's had some good games stacked together. He seems to be filling into that possession role. Again, problem with that game is if it does get out of hand, does the passing game start to dwindle? Again, we already mentioned Deebo Samuel, so we kind of started looking around. But again, this is why when we get to this position where we talk about that flex and that last wide receiver, you'll notice we kind of usually end with those guys. We talk about both so we can see if, hey, are there any names that really kind of hit? Now, DJ Chark's put together a very good year this year.
Yep.
Very solid year. His best part was starting off with Nick Foles. Nick Foles is coming back into the fray. DJ Chark, more of the long distance attack. He's not just that, but he is definitely the field stretcher of any of the guys they've got. And I think they're gonna have to score some points against Indianapolis with Brissett coming back. I mean, so it's not like they can just rest on Leonard Fournette.
And Indy's D isn't bad. I mean, their pass D is probably the better part of their defense. But there are some weapons, and Fournette, they're coming off a bye. They are going to feed Fournette. He's done a great job of handling the workload this year, and I think Indy's going to have to bring maybe somebody up from that back end that's so good in order to stop it. Chark has gone through the year. I mean, look, the first game of the year, 4 receptions on 4 targets. Then we go 9 targets. 5 targets, 8 targets, 11 targets, 7 targets, 5 targets, 12 targets, 9 targets. He is getting the looks with whether it was Foles or this whole time with Minshew. He's getting the looks. So the potential for him to, at $6,000, I think he could really come out with a game where he kind of goes back to, getting close to 9-10 targets, catching maybe a hair over half of those, and getting close to a 70-80 yard game and getting himself in the end zone with the upside potential could really blow it up. So that's it, my friends. That's what we're going to play. We mentioned a lot of other guys in the mix, and again, it's up to you to do your homework. We always say if we hear something between now and then, we'll make a change and maybe put the comments out on Facebook. But just to run it down, we've got Deshaun Watson at quarterback, Ezekiel Elliott as our top-end running back, Devin Singletary as our low-end running back, Julian Edelman as our top-end wide receiver, Marquise Hollywood Brown as our low-end wide receiver, DJ Chark Jr. as our third wide receiver. Greg Olsen slotted in as our tight end. Josh Jacobs as a flex. I really like that. And Minnesota's defense against Denver and Brandon Allen on their own home turf. And that will leave us with $100. Lock it and load it, folks.
You can send that $100 check to David Willauer.
Yeah, let's not say it, because then you can also ask for money from us if it poops the bed. But we will hopefully come out on the plus side on this. So have fun with it. Hopefully some of this stuff made sense. As always, we'll get this thing out and up so that you have time to play it for this weekend's main slate. And we'll see you next time on the Gridiron. Have a good day.